Take a look at this video. It features the infamous wrestler Gorgeous George facing off against Hans Schnabel in 1950. When you look at these guys, do they remind you of someone who's in shape, or do they look like dumpy old men? Well, this level of muscularity was actually considered extremely impressive and even attractive to some people back then. Newspapers would frequently describe George as the platinum blonde Adonis of the wrestling ring, sending women into hysterics. If Gorgeous George was a wrestler today, we'd probably see a 90-second TikTok video about his disproportionate facial thirds, negative canthal tilt, and suboptimal body fat percentage. Alright, so if I was Gorgeous George, I would start by going to Turkey to get a hair transplant, and then I'd spend $10,000 on nose surgery to remove the suboptimal nose width, and then Looksmaxxing and bodybuilding is dominating young men's feeds right now, and it's making men hate their physical appearance more than ever. But once you realize that getting to this point was inevitable due to a few key developments in the modern world, you'll never be able to look at yourself the same way again. Over the past 2 decades, psychologists wanted to answer a simple question. Do the faces we see on a regular basis change what our brains consider normal? To find out, they ran what are called adaptive coding experiments. The process was simple. Participants spent several minutes looking at dozens of faces that all shared the same exaggerated feature. Some were unusually thin, others unusually wide, more masculine, or more feminine. Then they were shown ordinary faces and asked to judge which ones looked normal or attractive. After spending just a few minutes looking at very thin faces, average faces began to look relatively heavier and wider. After looking at unusually wide faces, average faces appeared unnaturally narrow. This reveals something most of us intuitively know but may forget when we're having body image issues. Attractiveness is pretty malleable. All of us carry an internal average of what a face looks like. Depending on the physical or digital environment we find ourselves in the most, what we rate as normal, abnormal, or attractive looking will vary. Let's store that finding in the back of our minds for now, because I'm sure you're eager to ask another question. Isn't attractiveness objective? Everybody finds certain traits more attractive than others, so doesn't that discredit what I just said? Well, no, because that assumes that objectivity and malleability are opposites. There are absolutely aspects of attractiveness that are consistent across cultures. For instance, clear skin tends to signal health. Facial symmetry often reflects developmental stability. Youthfulness is associated with fertility. These preferences are rooted in our evolutionary history, but those broad preferences only tell a part of the story. They don't explain how attractive someone has to be before we consider them average, attractive, or exceptional, and that's where the environment or malleability part comes in. Think of it this way. If evolution gives us the blueprint for attraction, our environment fills in the details. Your brain compares every new face against an internal average built from the thousands of faces you've seen before. And in 2026, those faces increasingly belong to fitness influencers, models, cosmetic surgery patients, and people filtered beyond recognition. For hundreds of thousands of years, the only way that humans became more attractive on average was through evolution. Over countless generations, traits that reliably signaled health and reproductive fitness tended to become more common through natural selection. There is nothing unnatural about more humans having better facial and bodily indicators of health over time. What is unnatural, however, is how our environment and culture conditioned us to care about productivity, growth, and looks above all else. And I promise this next part is related to Looksmaxxing, so stay with me here. Before the Industrial Revolution, maximizing productivity was not the dominant organizing principle of Western society. For instance, in ancient Greece, the highest human activity was contemplation and leisure. Aristotle distinguished between labor done out of necessity and activities pursued for their own sake, arguing that leisure made philosophy, politics, and the cultivation of virtue possible. In fact, the word school is actually derived from the Greek word for leisure. Obviously, slaves and laborers worked constantly, but culturally, the ideal life for a free citizen was not maximizing output. Even if we fast forward a couple thousand years to medieval Europe, we can see that time wasn't measured in the modern sense of the word. Medieval Europe organized life around seasons and religious festivals more than continual economic optimization. It wasn't until the Protestant work ethic, industrial capitalism, and Victorian ideals of self-improvement that relentless productivity became morally righteous. Factories introduced a radical new way of thinking about human beings. For perhaps the first time in history, a person's value could be reduced to a simple question: how much can they produce in an hour? Every improvement, from better machines to better organization, was judged by one metric: more output per worker. Looksmaxxing came from this principle. It didn't appear out of nowhere. It's the logical endpoint of a culture that has spent the last 2 centuries convincing us that everything, including ourselves, can always be improved. And you would think that that principle would transfer over to something like healthcare, but it hasn't. I had been putting off a shoulder injury for months because the process of getting it fixed was just so tedious. I had to search for a doctor on Google that actually takes my insurance and set an appointment and have to wait potentially weeks just to see them. But today's sponsor, ZocDoc, solved that problem. ZocDoc is a platform where you can search and compare local in-network doctors with over 150,000 providers within 200 plus specialties across all 50 states. Their website has tons of reviews from real patients and detailed doctor profiles to help you choose the right one. For example, for my shoulder injury, I needed an orthopedic doctor. So I just searched for an orthopedic consultation for arm and elbow specifically, plugged in my insurance, and ZocDoc showed me all the available options in my area and their reviews. From there, it was as simple as making an appointment within the app. Appointments happen fast, usually within 24 to 72 hours, and you can even get same-day appointments. So if you've been putting off an injury or a doctor's visit because of the ridiculous hoops you gotta jump through, please prioritize your health and use ZocDoc. It's completely free to use, and if you want to try it out, you can go to the first link in my description, which is ZocDoc.com/Cole, or scan the QR code that you see on screen right now. Eventually, that optimization mindset slowly migrated from factories to the human body. And it all began with a man named Eugen Sandow. On a childhood trip to Italy in 1877, Sandow got to witness the ancient Greek and Roman marble statues of the gods firsthand. In subsequent years, Sandow would return to Italy with measuring tape in hand, recording the exact dimensions and circumferences of the statues. He would meticulously lift weights, assessing each exercise for its effectiveness in reaching the Greek and Roman proportions, until eventually he reached an extremely admirable aesthetic physique. Now at this time, Eugen was working in the circus as a strongman, lifting uncanny weights in front of thousands of people, but his promoter, Florin Ziegfeld, noticed something interesting. Ziegfeld found that the audience was more fascinated by Sandow's bulging muscles than by the amount of weight he was lifting, so Ziegfeld had Sandow move in poses which he dubbed muscle display performances. People paid money to watch a man pose, all thanks to Sandow's obsession with aesthetics. From this point onward, Sandow industrialized body improvement. He created one of the first public fitness institutes in London, exercise systems, home workout equipment, diet advice, and one of the first bodybuilding magazines, Sandow's Magazine of Physical Culture. The central idea of his philosophy was this: your body is not fixed, and you can build it through discipline, diet, and exercise, which seems stupidly obvious today, but at the time, that was a radically modern way of thinking about the body. What followed afterward was an explosion of fitness culture, and part of that culture was all about selling an ideal to insecure teens. After being named the world's most perfectly developed man, bodybuilder Charles Atlas launched what is considered to be the first real fitness program called Dynamic Tension in 1922. His most famous ad campaign was titled The 97-Pound Weakling. These comic strip style ads depicted a scrawny boy being bullied on the beach, only to return stronger and more confident after following Atlas's Dynamic Tension program. These ads resonated with millions of men, making his program a household name. It was an extremely effective strategy. Take a huge pain point for male insecurity, promise the solution through a compelling story, and make a simple offer. As more and more men became obsessed with building the perfect physique, bodybuilding exploded into the mainstream. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Frank Zane, and Lou Ferrigno appeared across magazine covers, and the commercial fitness industry boomed. America had roughly 3,000 private fitness clubs in 1978. By the early 2000s, there were around 20,000. Millions of Americans who never considered lifting weights were now paying monthly memberships to sculpt their bodies. The supplement industry exploded alongside it, with US sales growing from roughly $9 billion in 1994 to more than $26 billion by 2007. At the same time, marketers flooded magazines and television with promises of six-pack abs, rapid fat loss, and effortless muscle gain.
Want to lose weight and get lean? Want to shed inches and get chiseled abs? Want to get into the best shape of your life and do it in as little as 20 minutes a day and only 3 days a week? Well, now you can on the Crossbow by Weider.
By 2002, the Federal Trade Commission reported a dramatic increase in both the number of weight loss products being advertised and the amount of deceptive advertising surrounding them. This was now the environment of the average American. These were the faces and bodies we were seeing on a daily basis. And because our brains constantly recalibrate their internal average, like we discussed at the start of the video, our definition of normal and therefore attractive began to shift much faster than evolution ever could. But starting in the mid-2010s, we were thrown into a visual environment so detached from what the average person actually looks like that this process accelerated beyond anything humans had ever experienced before. Following the dominant organizing principle of Western society, app designers in Silicon Valley wanted to create a software experience that ensured the highest profits, no matter the moral cost. After all, whatever made us faster, stronger, more efficient, more profitable was what was morally good, not what made people feel good. That principle eventually led to what we typically refer to as the infinite scroll UI. The harrowing effects of the infinite scroll are best represented in a graph from the Washington Post. 800 US TikTok users agreed to share their phone data with the reporters who analyzed their usage trends over time. Starting in April 2024, the least active users scrolled for roughly 43 minutes, while the most active scrolled for close to 10 hours. Now watch what happens next. After a month, more than 3/4 of the users who had typically spent roughly 30 minutes per day on TikTok were now spending nearly twice that much time on the app on average. A few months later, these users' daily watch times reached 70 minutes on average, and for some, their time spent scrolling every day more than tripled or quadrupled. These algorithms adjust in real time to your preferences based on how much you engage with a video before swiping. And what videos are more likely to grab your attention when you're in a mindless, primitive state? Videos featuring attractive people, of course. This has been demonstrated repeatedly in psychology. In one of the largest recent studies on the topic, researchers had 2,748 participants rate 462 different people and found that simply making someone appear more attractive caused observers to perceive them as significantly more trustworthy, intelligent, and likable. Another 2024 study on Instagram influencers found that creators' physical attractiveness significantly increased engagement with their posts. Modern recommendation algorithms are not optimizing for truth or accuracy, they optimize for engagement. So if attractive creators consistently generate more clicks, likes, comments, and watch time, they're naturally more likely to be recommended to millions of other users. And if we combine this fact with the fact that most young Americans start and end their day using their phones, a time that is very influential on the mind, then the natural consequence is a culture with a distorted average attractiveness, and therefore a distorted perception of their own physical attractiveness. If you are spending 4, 5, even 8 hours on social media a day, an environment with a disproportionate amount of attractive and muscular people compared to how many of those people you see in real life, you will begin to see yourself as a chud. You will see looks as the only factor to success, security, and happiness, and you will do whatever it takes to suppress that insecurity, hide it, or get rid of it. What we spend most of our hours consuming reflects itself in our culture, and now that culture is being reflected back in a new genre of content making waves on social media: Looksmaxxing. Looksmaxxing is the inevitable endpoint of the industrialization of the human body. It takes everything that's awesome about fitness and bodybuilding, disciplining yourself and working hard to look better and feel more confident, and turns it into a competition of micro improvements that are mostly indistinguishable or in some cases less attractive to the average person. There is no better person to look for evidence of this than Clavicular. I'm sure I don't need to introduce him to you guys because he's already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on clipping accounts to promote his useless content.
How many people are clipping for you right now?
I believe it's about 1,000.
1,000? Do you know how many views you're getting a month?
1 billion.
I've told the story of Clavicular's background in my Why Gen Z Abandoned Morals for Money video. What I'd rather focus on as it pertains to this video is his recent nose job. First, some background on noses. In American culture, having a celestial or button nose, a skinnier nose is typically considered more attractive. Clavicular knew this, and since he also had a disproportionately large left nostril, he went to get facial surgery to appear more attractive. The surgery ended up having the opposite effect. His followers turned on him, called him less masculine, uglier, chopped, even trans-looking. But here's the strange part. On paper, Clavicular had moved closer to a conventional beauty ideal, so why didn't anyone seem to think so? Well, firstly, most of his viewers had spent hundreds of hours looking at his old face, and given what we know about internal averages, that's important. Your brain doesn't compare someone's appearance to an objective ideal every time you see them. It compares them to the mental average it's already built. When you've spent hundreds or even thousands of hours getting accustomed to someone looking a certain way, a major surgical change can feel jarring, even if that change aligns more closely with prevailing beauty standards. But while I'm sure the initial reactions are mainly due to shock, I think it's also extremely telling of what happens when you place your looks as the end-all be-all to life. The same audience Clavicular spent years teaching to obsess over tiny imperfections became the same audience dissecting his own face under a microscope. Once you train yourself to judge every millimeter of a person's appearance, you don't suddenly stop once they've improved. You simply begin searching for the next flaw. The nose becomes the jawline, then you scan their eye area, then the skin texture. There is always another asymmetry, surgery, or body fat percentage point to chase. That's because Looksmaxxing conditions you to evaluate human beings as collections of ratios and measurements instead of people. And when everyone around you is thinking that way too, becoming objectively better looking doesn't necessarily earn you more admiration. It often earns you more scrutiny. In other words, the better you become at spotting imperfections, the harder it becomes to ever feel satisfied. Confidence built on optimization is inherently unstable because optimization has no natural endpoint. There will always be another millimeter to chase. So what's the better alternative? I think I have a pretty decent answer to this as someone who takes very good care of their body and used to be an incredibly insecure teenage boy like many of you. Obviously, there is something incredible buried beneath all the crap that Looksmaxxing and bodybuilding promotes. Resistance training is one of the healthiest things you can do for yourself. Improving your physical appearance shows you have respect for yourself and you can properly keep discipline in our world of sugar and fast food. That's naturally attractive to most people, and you will find that you are generally treated much better on a daily basis. But if your desire to look better is solely external and solely fueled from self-hatred, no amount of optimization is ever going to fix how you feel about yourself. It is only when you actually confront and address the root issues that lead most men to want to pursue bodybuilding and Looksmaxxing in the first place that you begin to do all of this shit from a place of self-love. When you realize that somewhere down the line, your friend or your crush or your teacher told you why you weren't good enough, and some influencer took advantage of that insecurity as a way to keep you consuming their content or products, that's when you have the awareness to start the process of self-acceptance. You start to tell yourself, hey, I'm probably going to the gym even when I'm sore as shit and tired and definitely not recovered because I can't stand myself. And why can't I stand myself? Because other people taught me I shouldn't. Then you must become the parent to yourself that you wished you had as a child and unlearn all that toxic, insecure hustle culture mindset about how you have to constantly berate yourself and work 24/7 in order to be worth something in this world. People think self-acceptance means complacency when it's actually the exact opposite. When you accept who you are in this moment fully, you begin to want the best for yourself. And when you want the best for yourself, you will naturally want to challenge yourself, push yourself to the limit, and stay disciplined, but you'll do that in a much healthier, grounded way. Now that I've been able to heal some of the insecurities that were fueling my incessant need to work out and be huge, I may look a little smaller, but I've never been more confident, fulfilled, and had more energy in my entire life. And that is what building a better body is all about. Thank you very much for watching, and I wanted to let you guys know I just published my debut novel. It's about a 21-year-old named Elliot who lives in the modern world, goes through a tragic loss, and through that loss develops the ability to see into a parallel reality. There's a huge self-improvement part of this book. I like to call it the world's first self-improvement fiction book. So if you're interested in something like that, that blends like sci-fi, psychology, and philosophy together, and learns how to overcome your insecurities, that's a big part of the story, then you can check it out by going to the link in my description. And a video that pairs really well with this video is my male body image crisis video that is very popular on my channel. You'll probably enjoy it. And now I'm heading out. Goodbye.